I'm getting all hot and sweaty now. So we move on to keynotes. Really exciting time, I think, for many of us. And we have a tradition of just having some really wonderful, kind, generous, beautiful, scholarly, erudite, insightful people come and share their works with us. And I first met Ken Gale when he presented with Jonathan Wyatt at the University of Bristol when I was doing my PhD. And he was innovative in those years doing a joint PhD with a colleague. How have you ever heard of that? Somebody could do a PhD with someone else. And they did some wonderful work, which started, well, I think it started a long time before their PhDs, but that maybe cemented their relationship and conversations about two men and what two men have. And that's flourished into writing with all sorts of other people. Wonderful work that you've been doing over the last 20 years, Ken, and before then at the in education at the University of Bristol. So, unashamedly, who can resist a deal? This now, if you haven't grabbed one of these flyers for Ken's latest book, you should do, because you'll get 20% off. If it was expensive getting here, well, you can save some money. And the book that's coming is Writing Imminent, Concept Making, and Reorientation of Thought and Pedagogy and Inquiry. And it's an absolute delight when we made that qualitative conversation with you, and you took us through the dunes, and you talked about growing up in Cornwall, and what that Cornish culture has shaped you to be. Yeah. It's my absolute pleasure to have you give one of the keynotes this afternoon. Can you give our keynote?
Thanks, Kitrina. That was a lovely, generous, charming introduction. And I have to say, knowing Kitrina and David as well over the years, it's been lovely for me. Yeah, since those experiences in Bristol in the early 2000s, yeah, I guess a lot of things have happened. Yeah, I'm really, really grateful to Kitrina for her work, and I'm also, yeah, overwhelmed to be invited to do the keynote here. This is the gorgeous conference, and in a sense, even my experience today, it's just a small amount of experience I have today. It's kind of quite intimidating, you know, when you spend a bit of time to put the keynote presentation together, and you hear some pretty awesome stuff before you're going to present your work. You know? Yeah. So I've had some lovely stuff this morning. Always coming to this lovely conference, which I'm so grateful to Kitrina and David and all the rest of the team for organising. It's just terrific. I was in the pub with Dan and Kitrina and Stacy and Tim and a few others. I think we were talking about impact. And one or two questions came about at the top that the work we do is important. Yeah, this autoethnographic work we do is important. Yeah, it's portable, it's empathic, it's affective, and it's complex, but it needs to be done. It's so good. No, I better start doing my keynote. Otherwise, I'm going to run out of time. Here's a hard chart. That's fast. You would put 2.5 minutes. Cheers, mate. Yeah, okay. So there's the title: Activism, Artfulness, and Autoethnography. Is commensurability between qualitative and the post-qualitative possible? It's a pretty difficult question to address in the relatively short space of time we've got, but I'm just going to raise a few questions because many of you will know there is a movement toward post-qualitative inquiries, which some of the advocates of post-qualitative inquiries, including myself, problematize autoethnography. Yeah, and I'm going to maybe argue against this notion of incommensurability. I think there's a possibility that we can work the qualitative with the post-qualitative and the post-qualitative with the qualitative. So in the 20 or so minutes I've got, I'll give it a go, okay? And hopefully we'll start some discussion and hopefully it's useful to you, okay? So, from the top. Writing is a compulsion. In the whirling immensities of affect, the fragility of I is compelled to write. Writing takes over. Writing is a force. Writing has to be done. Seeks to insist, what else is there to do but write? In relation to these energizing forces, as a means of conveying the effective capacities at play in bringing writing to life, Virginia Woolf wrote a slide. Ba-boom. It was as if it became altogether intelligible. I had a feeling of transparency in words when they ceased to be words and become so intensified that one seemed to experience them, to foretell them, as if they developed one is already feeling. No one could have understood what I said, the queer feeling I had in the hot grass. The poetry was coming true. Nor does that give the feeling. It matches what I have sometimes felt when I write. The pen gets on the scent. The poetic force of that final phrase, the pen gets on the scent, has generated the leitmotif in this compulsion to write. Scribbling in a notepad, sitting on the shoreline of a quiet Cornish beach, always gets me. Or typing furiously into the darkness of night when silence is all surrounding. The immersive, spatializing energies at play in Virginia Woolf's word do their work. Whilst these words are highly inspirational and forceful, they can also be very unreliable. There are times when the tide refuses to flow in, when the winds of creativity refuse to blow, when the pages of the notebook remain blank and the clatter of the laptop is stifled. I've written of writing as an imminent doing, which can be animated in concept making and the reorientation of thought in pedagogy and inquiry. Get your copy now. I have written of writing and inquiry that resists the seductive forces of mimesis, application, and representation. I have written with the words of Betty St. Pierre and others, and have found the writing self that turns away from conventional humanist qualitative inquiry, including, of course, the writing of autoethnography and other forms. In her paper, Post-Qualitative Inquiry in an Ontology of Immanence, St. Pierre argues that qualitative and post-qualitative inquiry are incommensurable. St. Pierre argues that she asserts that the former relies on simply human-centric representations of being and ontology that are constrained within fixities of subjectivistic identity. She says, however, that in the latter case of post-qualitative inquiry, there are beginnings with ontologies of immanence, in which subjectivities are always emerging, always actualizing, and never fully actualized in the processualism of encounters. So, put quite simply and directly, she claims that qualitative and post-qualitative inquiries are thought of and practiced in very different and wholly incommensurable onto-epistemological arrangements. However, in my own turning away from these seductive forces, I have also felt a need to creatively address the binary collision that St. Pierre has set up between qualitative and post-qualitative forms of inquiry. And so, in this presentation today, I will briefly offer some suggestions about possible commensurabilities that might be created between them, and to ask if autoethnography, as an extremely valued mode of inquiry with a long and hugely productive history, needs to examine its practices and to make changes in response to the theoretical and ontological movements and directions that post-qualitative inquiry is generating. I will also briefly consider if it is possible for autoethnography to extend its practices beyond what Donna Haraway has described as the self-making proclivities of autopoiesis and the limiting engagements with the narrow identifications and subjectivities of the neurotypical and the individualizing tendencies of the simply human. Therefore, the rhetoric of this presentation is driven by the assertion that working with the simply human is no longer enough if autoethnography is to continue to hold its important position in qualitative inquiry, and at the same time, to be an active participant in the exciting new emergencies that are being generated by post-qualitative thinking and acting. When Manning quotes Whitehead as saying, "Every method is a happy simplification," she offers that all accounting for experience travels through simplification, and continues by asking with obvious rhetorical force how to recognize the freshness of processes underway with the weight of experience captured. How to reconcile force and form. Really important question, how to recognize force and form. It is this play between force and form that emerges as a central concern of my paper. In what Manning refers to as the anarchive, there are multiplicities of forces at play in the coming together of what might eventually be formed as an archive. What is key to the observation of these movements involves the noticing of how quickly and easily a transition from the becomings and processual vagaries of force are captured and encapsulated within the substantive fixities of being and form. In short, it has to be asked, is the ease with which movements from force to form are the result of, as Whitehead might suggest, a happy simplification? So, by way of exemplification, I found that in the organizational practice of bringing this presentation together, the formative pressures on anarchiving were having an archiving effect on the need to artfully craft the items of words into an acceptable shape, with putting irresistible force on its formal putting irresistible force on its final formative execution. What is put in? What is left out? Should have that have been expressed differently? Is the meaning here clear? And so on. I expect all of you presenting your papers of having the same kinds of questions. Yeah, what's left on the cutting room floor, and so on. As the play between force and form, between the anarchive and the archive, between what is expressed and what is not, continues to challenge the pressures and limitations of representation. The fundamental question asked by Spinoza inevitably returns and demands to be addressed. What can a body do? Perhaps in this rhetoric, perhaps in the rhetoric of Spinoza's question needs to be emphasized by further questioning, by asking what can anybody do? Not just simply human bodies, but material bodies, non-human bodies, bodies of thought, bodies of writing, and so on. What can a body do? I understand the post in post-human and post-qualitative as an expression that is less about designating and denoting a chronologically after, and rather as an expression that offers a sense of interactively more than human. Therefore, in this, and as an attempt to avoid regression to a happy simplification of method, therefore, in this, my preferred usage in this presentation is of a post-human that is indicative of a more than simply human. So, in addressing Spinoza's question, what can the body do, with these more than simply human proclivities and tendencies in mind, I sense that it is important to avoid thinking simply about the identity and subjectivity of this body, and to think more about body as movement, body as an agglomeration of forces, body as delusion assemblage, perhaps, a body that, as Manning says, occurs as a creation of a field of relation that exceeds the individual, yet carries its seeds of its singularity. So therefore, the question of what a body can do is less about the classified, categorized, and substantive individual that is defined as having the ability to act in this way or that, and is more to do with encounters and the collective relational forces of bodies becoming in the always changing conditions of experience. And so addressing the question of what a body can do cannot simply involve a concept of body as substantively fixed within a given individual form. Rather, it involves a processually active attunement to the constant play between the transversalities of force and form, where body is an always differentiating set of tendencies and movements imminently in play with the encounters, animations, and activations of multiple aggregations of discourses and materialities. In this respect, by making a move from working with the substantiations of being toward movements with the becoming and fluidity of process, it makes more sense to think and work with the concept of bodying. As outbodying, Manning says, the shape that we call the body still has bodying coursing through it. It is a fallacy of misplaced concreteness to take the momentary foregrounding of this shape as the form of the body. To stop a body from bodying is not only to accept the stilling it momentarily took, but to neutralize the environmental surrounds that are its biggest ally in co-composition. Today, I read Manning's words that were published in 2020. And in the reading, remember that Donna Haraway provocatively asked in her manifesto of the cyborgs, published nearly 40 years ago, she asked, why should our bodies end at the skin? In being startled by this, I wonder how we are still able to hold on to the supposed rationalism of the Cartesian a priori. How are we still able to maintain notions of isolated individualism and fixed forms of subjectivity that are imbued with identity, consciousness, and emotions, and that are somehow seen as being mine and mine alone? If Descartes' assertion that I think, therefore I am, continues to be the defining principle of human consciousness and awareness, then autoethnography, along with all other forms of qualitative inquiry, would appear to be living in a form of existential myopia, which continues to be perpetuated by the neurotypical traditions and persuasive discourses of neoliberal conservatism, frighteningly active in all aspects of life at the present time, in which one or two people have mentioned here about doctoral colleges and institutional pressures. Okay, so where does that leave us? Where does all that take us? How might it be possible to move forward from this position? In setting up what he referred to as non-representational theory, hi Dan, Nigel Frick claims to offer, quote, a resolutely anti-biographical Nigel Frick claims to offer a resolutely anti-biographical and pre-individual approach to inquiry, which works to avoid the construction of an artificial sense of individual wholeness, echoing Haraway's contention that our bodies do not end with our skin. In stressing the need for engagements with complexity and relationality, and demonstrating an awareness of Whitehead's assertion that we need to avoid the happy simplification of method, Frick's non-representational theory is designed as an attempt to engage with what he refers to as the on-flow of everyday life. In emphasizing the power of the precognitive as a performative technology for adaptive living, Frick expresses life as a viscous becoming in time-space, moved by the desire to do more than simply squeeze meaning from the world. In a theory that concerns itself with practice, action, and performance, and that avoids the structuralist heritage of attempting to uncover symbolic meaning, where other, more practical forms of meaning or no meaning at all exist. Frick offers a principle of relational materialism, where material objects are to be given the same conceptual and empirical weight that is warranted to their human companions. Within the experimentalism espoused in this approach, Frick expresses the importance of all bodies in terms of their affective capacities, echoing the crucially important Spinoza's assertion that all bodies have the capacity to affect and be affected. Frick posits a non-representational compositional node that insists upon courses of inquiry, engaging with the relational necessity of more than simply human approaches that are not used simply to observe the world and then give meaning to it, but rather, in Kathleen Stewart's words, that animate worldings. In these worldings, there are attachments and attunements to the play between force and form, and the always incomplete capture in the actuality of this and that. In offering the concept of what she refers to as reals, R-E-A-L-S, reals, Stewart suggests ways in which Frick's approach to the construction of non-representational theory can be given life. She does this in ways that might also help to dissolve the unhelpfulness of the qualitative, post-qualitative binary construction that I mentioned at the beginning, offering opportunities for autoethnography to move forward in research creative ways in the future. Stewart likens these reels to Deleuze and Guattari's concept of haxaeties, working to denote the non-personal individuation or relational coming to life of all bodies, environmental assemblages and momentary movements in space-time. In expression, a haxaety is a thisness that is beyond representation, qualitatively existing in eventfulness, in what Whitehead might describe as an actual occasion. As Deleuze and Guattari have said, consistency contains only haxaeties along intersecting lines. Forms and subjects are not of that world. Forms and subjects are not of that world. This sentence is important in helping us to come to terms with the concept of haxaety, and to think about how the concept can be used to animate and enliven autoethnographic practices. Haxaeties have no beginnings and endings. It is not that they are formless. It is, as Simone would have it, that they are about information. Information which is hyphenated. Always information, always responding to forces, always on the move. Now you see me, now you don't. Haxaeties are in and therefore creative of the moment. In this respect, they are of immanence and cannot be used to express representation. Perhaps this could be expressed simply by saying that haxaeties show, they do not tell. Yeah? Stewart says, Kathleen Stewart again says, theory can be drawn through writing into the way that people and things venture out into reels, R-E-A-L-S. Reels that, it must be said, are not the kinds of things that a representation later brings to life or gives meaning, but a recursive haxaety that loops through things, starting to emerge or layering into an accretion. In relation to Stewart's contention that theory can be drawn through writing, in my recent book, get your copy now. In my recent book, I have attempted to engage in concept making as an attempt to reorientate thought in pedagogy and inquiry. In this, I followed the contention of Whitehead that we must engage in and with processes of becomings in preference to enlightenment's concern with the fixities of substance and being. And so, in practical terms, the writing of this book has involved me in the engagement with two important practices, which I believe are important in terms of what I'm sharing here today. So I'll just briefly go over these. The first of these is the animation of what Deleuze and Guattari refer to as a free and wild creation of concepts. Great phrase, isn't it? A free and wild creation of concepts, yeah? Get out the Molotov cocktails. This is the speculative, non-representational practice which asserts that there is no heaven for concepts, that we cannot simply lift concepts from the shelf, dust them off, and then copy and apply them in our methods. Therefore, the speculative force of Deleuze and Guattari's contention is that all forms of inquiry must involve the creation of concepts that are always new. Such an approach is not to suggest a reckless wildness, rather a speculative openness, which is in attunement to and with alertness and imminent emergence with encounters and eventfulness. The second of these suggestions, the first free and wild creation of concept. The second of these practices, which I'm attempting to use as a means of imminently expressing movements in moments, the moments of movement, in sensing the animation of imminent doing and in bringing this into the thought of the very act of my writing. Quite simply, I am working with the use of verbs rather than nouns. Nothing more, nothing less. In this, I'm finding that speculative animations in the writing are taking place when, for example, rather than talking about self, I talk about selfing. I shared another example of this to you earlier in citing Kathleen Stewart's use of worlding in preference to world. Her usage here suggests that the fixed substantiation of the world is an illusion, and that we are all a part of the becoming of the world and its movement. Yeah, witness the climate emergency. So, in order to work to animate and activate writing and inquiry as immanent rather than as a representational modality, I am finding that this practice essential in working with concept forming as an eventful practice and in dealing with the processual and informational fluidities and encounters in the constant play between cause and form. Deleuze-Guattari's concept of becoming animal exemplifies this becoming in terms of always being on the lookout for encounters as an essential force for research active creativity. So just as animals are alert, define their territory, and assure their existence in becoming animal, speculative, non-representational approaches to inquiry have the capacity to open up all bodies, potentialities, innovations, and to possibilities of there always being something new and unimagined just around the corner. Worlding involves an alertness for that which is always other than representation, always leading toward that which exists singularly as an event and speculating on possibilities not previously imagined. In this, as Spirit graphically points out, the social is composed of entities that are both present and absent, atmospheres, affects, virtual memories, hauntings, lots of things that people have talked about today, instance of the holding together of the disparate self, the corporeal and incorporeal capacity to be in a continuous variation of matter and event. And so I'll bring it to a close now. And so, if autoethnography is to work as an animate singularity within post-qualitative inquiry, its practices need to be alert to the elusivity of I in a non-representational and therefore realist ontology. Therefore, I is always bodying, always in processual play, never substantively fixed. Thinking, doing in this way stresses the need for an avoidance of making a simplification of the presence of I. We must work with the complexity of its affective and relational presencing. We can be helped in this by using the practices that emerge from the concept of bodying, by positing the body as always in movement, always becoming, always actualizing, by imagining the body in virtuality through the creative speculative practice of what I refer to as spiriting. When Deleuze-Guattari engaged with the actual and the virtual, they were not formatively binarizing the real against the apparent. They were positing the multiplicities of movements of actualization that are always in play between the two. So I use the actualizing potentiality of this concept of spiriting as a means of thinking about practicing, as not to do with objects, forms, or content, rather as a noticing of the becoming of relational movements, as practicing that are always on their way, always in attunement with the more than, always beyond the substance of bodies, and about the bodying of force, taking the fixity of form as task, always about stretching into the always not yet known, what Manning refers to as the feeling forth of future potential. So, in thinking and working through these matrices of actualization and in relational multiplicity, the compositional aggregations they germinate, there are always acts of actualization. Actualization never sits still. It is animate, and always moving toward. In this, acts are always activating. Sorry, I'm just repeating myself. They are, as Sorini Madison pointed out, acts of activism. They create change. They have an impact. In the capacious modalities, in the capacious multiplicities and agencies of assemblage, human and non-human bodies are always activating. Again, aware of Spinoza's important assertion that all bodies have the capacity to affect and be affected, there is always the force of new and emergent life. If future autoethnographies are to engage with the eventful and forceful capaciousness of these movements, then the possibility for their movement towards post-qualitative inquiry hangs in the balance, always having the potential to be made fully real in the not yetness lurking at the edges of always actualizing experience. Boom. Thank you.
Wow. Ken, that's amazing piece you put together and what the challenges in there, and a lot of signposts for us. and things that we need to take on board. So thank you for that. The next two, or the next keynote, you probably read in the program that Stacy Holman Jones has written umpteen numbers of books and is director of theatre and performance at Monash University, and that Dan Harris is professor of innovation and research at MIT. And both of them together and in separate ways have written masses about autoethnography, about the body, about queering the body. But more importantly for me and for many of us here, they have made space for us.
Yeah, yes.
And have included us. And we would have not done the things that we have done, David and I in particular, coming out to America and meeting you at the International Congress of Qualitative Inquiry. We would not have been able to do our scholarship if you hadn't made a way for us. And so I'm really touched and thrilled that you have agreed to be our second keynote today. Can you give a big hand to Stacy on the go?
Pick your side, Stace. Still awake? Still with us? Where are we?
Still away.
Okay, well, we'd like to begin, as is the tradition in Australia where we live, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather here today, the Britons, as far as we are able to research, Indigenous peoples who inhabited Great Britain from at least the British Iron Age until the High Middle Ages. And we pay our respects. Oh, that's your big time.
We pay respects to elders past and present, and we extend those respects to other Indigenous people who are with us today. We'd especially like to thank the generations of Indigenous people who have met, talked, and made creative work here before us, a legacy from which we and others continue to learn and benefit. And we'd also like to extend our thanks to the conference organizers for the lovely invitation to give a keynote, and also to our colleague and friend Ken Gale for his gorgeous words just before us.
And also to you for holding us so well today, to both of you. Ready? Judith Butler's 2019 talk, Out of Breath, Laughing and Crying at the Body's Limits, explores how the body works differently when laughing and crying than it does when speaking and gesturing.
She offers that laughter causes the body to, quote, break apart, and it shows itself breaking, offering a collective and individual chance to depart from a sense of the ordinary.
Laughter also moves us out of a singular focus on the or a self. Through laughter, we can be, quote, beside ourselves, caught up in the collective contagion of public hilarity.
However, with a few notable exceptions, autoethnographers have not given equal consideration to the importance of laughter as a collective breaking open of political potential.
So in today's talk, we invite you into the power of laughter as a collective restorative reverberation in 3 acts. In Act 1, we explore the role of feminist hysteria in jamming the wheels of patriarchal power.
In Act 2, humor is a way of reckoning with changing selves and bodies, bodying, and what it means to both personally and politically laugh in and through those changes.
And then in Act 3, we turn to the joy our animal kin bring us and suggest how autoethnography is a multiplying poly-puppy amorous endeavor. Act 1, no laughing matter.
University of South Florida Oracle newspaper, October 5th, 2009. University police arrested Vincent McCoy, 23, after someone called to report an individual on Bull Runner campus bus D claiming he had a bomb. Armed police surrounded the bus and ordered passengers to put their hands up and turn around, asking who said they had a bomb. McCoy told police he was kidding, and he didn't resist when arrested. Authorities searched his backpack, which held textbook, but no bomb. Another individual was the subject of a second 911 call on Monday. A white male wearing a black tank top and cowboy hat was detained in front of Russell M. Cooper Hall when police received a report of someone holding a large hunting knife. And he was questioned and later released. It's kind of like an airport, University Police spokeswoman Lieutenant Meg Roth said. You can't joke about a bomb in an airport. You can't joke about it on the university campus. A lot has changed in this world, and that's just something that nobody can joke about anymore. I was working from home before COVID, 2009, when I received a series of texts about the campus being on lockdown. I called into the office and spoke to our graduate program assistant, Keisha, who, after assuring me that she was safe, whispered into the phone.
They think it's the 49.
What? The independent study group?
Yes. Campus police have been here asking questions.
Jay, Jason, and Claire are theater kids, not terrorists.
They want to know about the manifesto, the sidewalk chalk messages about attacking the institution.
Those kids are concerned about academic freedom.
They want to talk to you.
Who?
The dean and the vice provost.
The meeting was scheduled for the next day, but I wasn't concerned. This wasn't anything to do with the students or their independent studying guerrilla theater. Following the traditions of avant-garde artists collectives, the group chose an intriguing name for themselves, the 49, from the sign on the door of our black box theater. Capacity 49 persons. The 49 also generates the impression that their numbers are significant. The 3 just doesn't have They took up sidewalk chalk to advertise themselves to their peers and drafted a manifesto voicing dissatisfaction about how the arts is undervalued on campus, saying in part, we attack the institution that is limiting our education. We attack academic injustice. Besides, the dean was my former department chair, always a champion of my performance art hijinks and my work with students. But what I hadn't anticipated was the vice provost, professor of criminology, and an expert on university management. The vice provost wanted my head. He chastised me for encouraging students to voice their opinions anonymously, making provocative statements that could be read as threats. And he schooled me in the finer details of the significance of the number 49. Anyone know this? A World War II code for plutonium-239 of the atomic bomb. Smiled and nodded. He already heard all of this. His eyes encouraged me to remain silent. But my body could not contain my laughter at the ridiculousness of bombs on buses and cowboys wielding knives and puppies, or the paranoia of the theory that the 49, really the 3, were cooking up an atomic bomb in the black box. Exploded out of me into the Maggie Haddonfield writes that as an aspect, laughter is the quote sensual storm at the scene of the birth, the disconnect between trigger and response. We might even say that my laughter was hysterical in the feminist sense. I was a woman in a long line of women back before me, joining in the doubled up meaning of hysteria as a woman's problem and a history of performance in which women act out and act up. The vice provost, however, did not find this turn of events or this conversation hysterical in any sense. This was no laughing matter. And as punishment for my wanton disregard of campus safety, we suggested that I be, 1, suspended without pay until an investigation will be completed. 2, that I make a public apology for the harms I and my students have caused the campus community. And 3, that my name be placed on the US government's terrorist no.
All right, you've arrived.
Debated the terms of my punishment with the vice provost, and it was difficult to say the least. In the end, an official warning about the incident and my involvement was placed in my HR record. I was banned from leading any further independent studies, and I was required to send a letter of apology to the campus people. And I did send a cheeky letter to the editor that explained the unfounded threat of the 49, but I did not apologize. And while I don't think that finding the humor in this event transformed fear into what feminist humor scholars Julie and Cynthia Willett term a quote biosocial event that reshapes the contours of social space, I do think that the no laughing matter of the 49 is an example about how humor might, in Henfeld's words, quote, jam the wheels of the grinding feedback loop between bodily matter and structural power.
Indeed, indeed.
Act 2, all the rage.
In 2019, at the age of 53, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, one of the most maligned and feared mental illnesses around. That kind of event in middle age brought both laughter and tears to me and to those who loved me. It certainly, following Judith Butler, took my breath away. There are many events in life, of course, that, quote, cause the body to break apart and show itself breaking, disrupting the ordinary and demanding a, quote, start again. Menopause alone does this for many of us. Gender transitioning definitely does. But going through female menopause and male puberty at the same time, got no laughing. It's all about the hand. We assert ourselves and are simultaneously defined by those around us, the body. Those of us with a diagnosis of BPD understand the entanglement of an often unruly interior landscape with an often overwhelming exterior landscape. It's a diagnosis that, in Butler's words, breaks open new political potential. Always the ethnographer, in order to begin making sense of my diagnosis, I interviewed 10 other people with BPD, but I didn't want it to be doom and gloom, maybe in an attempt to reassure myself. From those interviews, I wrote a play called All the Rage, which focuses on the funny, absurd, heartbreaking, and hilarious sides of having BPD. This first monologue is an excerpt from the opening of that play, where Mel, one of the two characters, introduces themselves to a pub comedy night, kind of like this. I've been 2 weeks since being released from hospital. And I just want to make a brief content warning here. The text does have some harsh language in it and references to violence, but any of you who were upstairs this morning, it doesn't even come close. I just want to say, if you need to step out, please do. I can move on. Okay, yes, hello, hi everyone. Hello, good to be here. My name is Brad. That's like bad with an R. Yeah, how's everybody doing today? All right, still with me? Yeah. Yeah, this is my first time. I'm a stand-up virgin. I figured why not? Once you're past 40, basically like Pilates for guys. Anyway, I hate Sundays, and Mondays too, for that matter. I don't know why, they're just kind of depressing, you know, but, hey, I'm not here to talk about depression. I mean, I could. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm here to talk about business. I used to be very, very successful, advertising executive, when I was younger. I mean, by the time I was 30, I was making like, 7 figures, over 2 million a year at least. I loved my job. Gorgeous girlfriend, being with my own driver, the work, you know, it was good, I won't lie. But well, by the time I reached my mid-30s, it's just sort of kind of, you know, started losing the plot. Well, here's an example. This one time I was like walking out of a club and some guy grabs me from behind, and I'm like, I mean, dude, I used to do like Wong Chun and Shaolin and stuff back in the day. I was master at that. So I just like, it was like instinct. I just threw the guy over my shoulder and right into the traffic. And unfortunately, it turns out he was a fucking cop. Bad story in my life. Then these other two cops came charging out of nowhere, and then they grab me, throw me straight to the ground. I'm like wearing a $2,000 suit. I'm like, dudes. And they're like, you didn't hear us calling out for you. I'm like, calling out? Why are you calling out for me? And they go, that's assault on the police. And I'm like, but I didn't know it was a cop. And then they physically throw me in a van, take me down to William Street lockup for the night, and then they put me in with this whole bunch of other people, like really angry fuckers, you know? And so I'm like, all right, okay, wanna be like that? Let's just kicking this door in. And I was just like, so we did. We're just like pounding on it, and it's starting to give way. And then they like pull me out of there and throw me in a cell, just like there's a camera, kind of like that camera, and padded walls, the whole thing, and no toilet. Right? This is a police station. I mean, I've got to go. I was probably still drunk. I don't know. So I just kind of like blocked it out and started peeing. You know, like on the walls, on the all over that place. It was like this sprinkler system going mad. There's the same cop comes back in. He's like, no, we're not doing that, buddy. You got 2 choices. You can have an assault record, or you can have a drunken disorderly, which is a $550 fine. And I'm like, sure, I'll take the drunk and disorderly. That's like what? Oh, half an hour's pay for me. And he goes, oh, you're a smart ass, eh? And he grabs me, throws me out into the street. I mean, my head's spinning. I turn around, the roller shutters are down. So of course, like I start kicking them again. And, you know, and he's like, what do you want now? You want to come back in? And I'm like, no, where's my $2,000 jacket? Without a word, a door opens, my jacket just gets like thrown into the street. I'm like, thanks. Pick it up, put it on, brush myself off. And yeah, I start walking, and then there's one of those little kiosks on the side of the road. I'm like, fucking hell, the sun is really bright. And so I just purchased a pair of sunglasses, a Red Bull, chugged it down, started walking home. It was a great morning. So, well, maybe Mel's a bit of an asshole, okay? But kind of like, I think lovable asshole, who knows? But unfortunately, in this play, his big debut is interrupted by his love interest from the hospital, a person called Mags, who tries to take a more direct run at talking about BPD, and unfortunately is a lot funnier than he is. So this is Mags getting your show. Thank you, everybody. Good to be here. Anybody have kids? Kids?
Yes.
Oh, I have kids, teenagers. I mean, I'm their in-house Uber Eats driver. Okay. Anybody? Uber Eats? Yeah. Okay. These guys, they're texting me from their bedrooms. I'm like in the kitchen. I cook the food, pack it up, put my helmet on. So I'm riding my bike up the stairs, knock on the bedroom door, deliver it in a paper bag, they're on their phones tracking my progress. They give me bad reviews. Anyway, I've got something called BPD, borderline personality disorder. You may have heard of it. It's all the rage. You've probably seen this in film and television for ages, the old bunny boiling scene in Fatal Attraction, you know, or then there's Love, Crazy Ex-Girlfriends, Fleabag. Oh, and what about the Joker? Complete wacko. Yeah, we get it back. All right, I'll admit it. I've been aggressive at times. I mean, not tonight. Not yet. But some people have what we call quiet BPD. I mean, so just quietly black. You know, what the fuck even is that? I mean, there's that, it's sort of like that old label, idiot savant, right? It's okay to be crazy if you're also brilliant, but you can't just be an idiot. And stereotypes, sorry, I'll tell you where most of those come from. Healthcare providers, not therapists, definitely not therapists. Everything you're oversensitive, scary, manipulative, aggressive. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta get to drink. I'm gonna have a drink. Next, here's an example. Okay, I started with this new shrink last week, right? And I had to go through the whole thing again, like the whole entire story. And I'm like, you know this on my file? She's new at the hospital, I'm not. And she's like, yes, it's in your file, but this is part of us getting to know each other. And I'm like, I don't want to get to know. And she goes, yeah, but you do realize it's, I mean, and I said, yeah, but you do realize it's re-traumatized to keep retelling my whole fucked up life story, right? And she's like, yes, I do, but lots of doctors don't even want to treat people with BPD because it's like a meat grinder. And I'm like, a meat grinder? And she's like, well, a lot of sites won't treat you because you know what they're saying. Being in the room with a borderline feels like you're in a meat grinder. It's too stressful for the therapist. Oh, it's too stressful. Therapist. I say, let's just overhaul the health system completely, okay? My opinion, ask the teenagers. There's got to be a TikTok out there somewhere. Anyway, thanks for having me. See you next time. In that work, I'm interested in what the cringe lab might open up for abject experiences like mental illness, gender transition, and more. What does it mean to laugh in the face of adversity? The queer community and queer theory have explored this for a long time. Laugh or you cry? Well, we laugh while we're crying. And in Act 3, we find laughter and joy with the most unexpected companions. Title.
Oh, sorry. This is Act 3, Holly, Puppy, and Emily.
Hello, excuse me.
Yes. What is it, Hazel?
Is lockdown like over? Because it seems a little busier out there.
It's been over for years. I think it's a little hazy.
Yeah, well, then why are they home all the time? So I mean, that is seriously codependent. Get out more than get out. It's boring in here.
Said nobody wants to go out that much anymore, including Stacy and Dan.
Oh, well, COVID wasn't all that bad, was it? They got us.
Totally. Started working from home and canceled all those ridiculous travel plans. They thought they needed a little tool in their lives. Someone to play with Murphy.
Maybe not. Well, they found me in Dubbo of all places, and Dan drove 8 hours to pick me up and then made me ride back all the way home to Melbourne. Ugh, I still hate riding in the car after that horrible trip.
But what about me? I can ride a truck with a bunch of other dogs all the way from Sydney.
It's terrible. I mean, I told him I was fine being an only puppy in a house with crabby senior dogs. It was fine.
Possibly.
Well,
love me now.
yeah, true. Mostly, except for Murphy. He is.
But I just want him to love me.
Well, Tinker, I've told you, you can't make him love you if he won't. Oh, you want nobody, Ray? Give me a break.
Thanks a lot. Okay, let's just say, except for Murphy, we were a cure.
We were?
Sure. You remember all those studies they read that said we boosted Dan and Stacy's well-being, staved off loneliness, gave them some distant visiting with the neighbors at the dog park.
Well, the benefits of pandemic puppies flowed both ways, didn't we? We loved all the attention they gave us.
Well, we are social animals, but
We're packs.
forgetting the downside though is,
What's that? There's no downside to us.
oh, I think you know.
I do not.
You've never been fully socialized. You're a freak in public.
Oh, look who's talking. Oh my God, who's the one hiding under Dan's coat at the dog park when somebody just like comes up to say hi? Not me.
Who jumped out of the car window?
That again. I thought I saw something. A bird in the house? Or maybe a cat? I don't know, it happens so quickly.
You have to be in the car again because you never got to go anywhere or travel at that kind of speed. You panicked.
Well, so what if I did panic? It's not my fault. It's puppy trauma. I tried to learn the ropes as a puppy, how to act around other dogs, but how was I supposed to learn on Zoom? I mean, come on.
I did. Please, can we not talk about Zoom?
I will talk about Zoom. That is the real pandemic. Sure, it meant we could stay home and not get COVID, but seriously, it messed with our hearts
And our heads.
and relationships.
And any ability to have a coherent thought, conversation.
Too, but we did have fun sometimes on Zoom with you.
Like when?
Like when you wore that hoodie and then ran along the back of the couch behind Stacy every time you wanted her to get off and take you for a walk.
He laughs doing that, and she actually did.
Not very professional.
First,
Oh, I think you look goofy in that hoodie. It was very embarrassing.
you know, in that cable knit sweater, and Sissy Dan rocking in their arms, and the whole entire.
That sweater was hot.
I don't understand.
No, not hot like that. It was like boiling. I was dancing full time when I had to wear this carrying clothes.
Anyway, Zoom was the worst of it for us. At least we weren't part of the big wave of pet regret when lockdowns were lifted and we all went back to work.
I know. I heard in the dog park that dogs being abandoned quadrupled. Not just older dogs, puppies, like littles like us.
Or worse, people changing their minds and advertising us for sale for thousands and thousands of dollars, just trying to make back the money they paid for us in the first place.
That is cruel and dishonest.
Yeah, I mean, if 23 million households, nearly 1 in 5 in the US adopted a pet during the pandemic, then you gotta think, what if Dan and Stacy changed their minds?
They love us. Like when Dan got adopted, same thing.
Yeah, but they can't give human kids back that easily anyway. It's different with dogs. I read somewhere that.
Hang on. You can read?
How fine, the laptop wasn't for nothing. I taught myself to read.
Wow. Murphy.
Murphy's the one who told me to do it.
He did? Why didn't he tell me? I mean, I can learn to read if I wanted to.
Hazel, come on. I mean, you're cute. And you're so lovable. You're not exactly a Rhodes Scholar.
Oh my God, I resent that. Fine.
Hey, listen, Hazel,
Go on.
did you know that 1 trillion puppies were thrown away or died at after the great COVID puppy adoption.
Really, Tinker, a trillion? That's fake news. Stop watching Fox.
Research.
Trillions.
But okay. More like about 15% got sick and died, but still, that's a lot.
That's terrible. That hurts me. Actually, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
That makes you almost think that Jack Halverson is right.
Jack who?
Jack Halverson, queer theorist at Columbia, author of Wild Things.
Oh, Wild Things. I like the sound of that. What's that one about?
How wildness has been associated with queerness historically,
Queerness.
and about how having pet puppies like us is like pedophilia.
I thought that was something else, not dogs.
Oh, Hazel, pedophilia, a fetishization and commodification of the relationship between pets and humans.
I thought we were companion species.
No, it's not a hairway.
What's wrong with that? I liked that being kin.
No. Halverson says pet commodification and fetishization is almost the same as heteronormativity, a kind of petophilia.
Are you saying that Dan and Stacy have a pet fetish? That's creepy.
It's good for us to be informed.
It seems kind of us then, if I'm honest, kind of dualistic, kind of binary.
It's strange, isn't it?
It is.
Hetero, ironically.
Ironically, I don't even know what you're saying. I don't know what those words mean, but they're big. They're so big.
Okay, hey, I'm just thinking of the binaries. Pets, owners, gay, straight, dead, undead.
Undead, as in zombies? Like, is that like zoomies when we get crazy in the afternoon?
No, that's more like Zoom, pretending you're living life when you're really going through the motions like the living dead.
That is dark, Tinker. That's really dark.
It is. Sorry.
What about that nice person, Natalie, that she said, what was it she said when she was visiting us?
Natalie Lovelace.
Yeah. Good cats from that one.
Mm.
Yeah. What did she say about like love or?
Oh, yeah. Remember she talked about arrows, about being poly as a cure for what ails us?
Right.
Poly,
Poly.
discipline, amorous.
Well, I don't know.
I love that.
Wasn't it just love? Didn't she just say practice love? I mean, method. Practice love, be kin.
No. She said to produce new kinship ties, not only in terms of content, the who, but in terms of the form, the how. It's all about following desire and an act of curiosity.
That's fetishes again, isn't it?
It's about getting good.
Okay, well, that sounds better than Living Dead to me. This poly.
Discipline and
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Exactly.
not zombies.
No.
All right, but what does that make us? Are we pedophiles then? That's right. No feel good. Zombie pedophile.
No. Okay, listen, what if we're poly, puppy, amorous? What if we are disrupting productivity in our everyday and Dan and Stacy's research lives?
Okay.
Following desire
Yes,
and using laughter as a way to push autoethnography into unpredictable directions.
oh, I like the sound of that. Hey, Stacy and Dan are winding up that Zoom call again. Let's do some zoomies behind them on the couch so they'll hang up and take us for a walk. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.